When police broke into the Lancelin family home, they were greeted by something out of a nightmare. Leonie and Genevieve, a mother and a daughter, lay on the floor in pools of blood, their faces unrecognizable. Their eyes had been gouged out, their bodies beaten and mutilated with a hammer and a kitchen knife. Upstairs, the killers Christine and Lea Papin, the family's live-in maids, sat calmly in their bed, covered in blood. When asked why they did it, their response was as chilling as the scene itself.
It was her or us.
This isn't just a story about a horrific crime. It's about how two sisters went from quiet, obedient servants to perpetrators of one of France's most shocking murders. Christine and Lea Papin didn't have an easy start in life. Born into a troubled family in Le Mans, France, their childhood was filled with hardship and trauma. Christine, born in 1905, and Lea, 7 years younger, had an older sister, Emila, who reportedly joined the convent after an alleged assault by their father. Their parents' marriage was volatile, marred by abuse, and eventually crumbled. When their mother took custody of their children, things didn't improve. The sisters were sent to an institution for a time, allegedly to help them cope with the chaos of their upbringing. When they were old enough, their overbearing mother decided the girls would work as domestic servants, believing it was the best way for them to contribute financially. Christine and Lea had little choice but to comply, beginning a life of servitude. In 1926, the sisters found work with the Lancelin family, a well-to-do household that included René, a retired lawyer, his wife, Leonie, and their adult daughter, Genevieve. For 7 years, they lived and worked in the Lancelin home, following a strict routine. To outsiders, it seemed like they had landed in a relatively good situation. They were paid standard wages, shared the same food as a family, and even had a heated room to themselves, which was luxuries for domestic works at that time. But appearances can be deceiving. Leonie, the wife, was a perfectionist who demanded the impossible. She was known for her infamous white glove test, running her fingers across furniture to check for even the slightest speck of dust. When she discovered that Christine and Lea were sending their earnings to their mother, she intervened, cutting all the sisters' financial support to their family. Despite the outward stability of their employment, cracks were forming. Christine and Lea were quiet and reserved, spending most of the time together in isolation. They rarely left the house except to run errands and attend church on Sundays. For 7 years, their daily lives revolved around their work and their bond with each other, a bond that would soon spiral into something dark and destructive. For years, Christine and Lea Papin kept their frustrations hidden, maintaining a professional demeanor as they followed the rigid rules of the Lancelin household. They cleaned, cooked, and carried out their tasks without complaint. But under the surface, tension simmered. The sisters were inseparable, relying on each other for emotional support. But their isolation from the outside world made their bond intense, almost too intense. But by the time they had spent 7 years working for the Lancelins, the pressure of perfection was taking its toll. Leonie, with her unrelenting standards, were criticizing them over the smallest mistakes. If a speck of dust was found or a task wasn't completed to her liking, she didn't hesitate to scold them. Her demeanor wasn't overly abusive, but it was oppressive, enough to make the sisters feel trapped. Christine, the elder of the two, seemed particularly affected. She had a fiery personality and often took on the role of protector, shielding Lea from their mother's demands during childhood and now from Leonie's criticisms. Lea, on the other hand, she was quiet and submissive, following her sister's lead without question. Their relationship was almost symbiotic, with Christine's dominant personality controlling much of their dynamic. Now things began to unravel in subtle ways. Christine's mood grew darker, and her resentment towards Leonie intensified. She started voicing her frustrations to Lea in whispers, describing their employer as an oppressive force keeping them from living their own lives. The sisters retreated further into themselves, their bond strengthened as their feelings of isolation deepened. The final straw came on a cold February evening in 1933. It was raining heavily, and the sisters assumed the Lancelins would be out late visiting Leonie's brother. As they went about their chores, a minor mishap occurred. The iron they had picked up from the repair shop blew a fuse, leaving the house without power. Deciding it could wait until morning, they continued their work in the dim light of a candle, unaware that the family would soon return home earlier than expected. When Leonie and Genevieve walked through the door and discovered the power outage, Leonie's reaction was swift and furious. She berated the sisters, her voice echoing through the darkened house. Years of bottled up frustration collided with the sudden confrontation. and for Christine, it was just too much. The tension that had been building for years finally snapped. The confrontation escalated faster than anyone could have predicted. As Liani's angry words filled the room, Christine's frustration reached its breaking point. Without warning, she grabbed a pewter jug from a nearby table and struck Liani on the head with it. The sound of the impact echoed through the house. Genevieve, startled by the attack, rushed to her mother's defense, but Christine's rage had fully taken over.
I'm going to massacre them.
Christine reportedly screamed, her voice trembling with fury. The outburst sent Lea running down from the attic to see what was happening. When she saw the chaos unfolding, Christine turned to her and barked a chilling command.
Finish her off.
Lea, ever obedient to her older sister, joined in the attack. The sisters unleashed their pent-up rage on the family in a frenzy of violence. They grabbed whatever they could find, a hammer, a knife in the pewter pot, and used them to beat and mutilate the mother and daughter. Christine, in a fit of sadistic fury, gouged out Genevieve's eyes with her bare hands, while Lea followed suit with Liani. The gruesome act left both women defenseless, unable to see the horrifying brutality unfolding around them. The violence continued long after the victims were down. The sisters struck again and again, reducing Liani and Genevieve to a lifeless, unrecognizable state. Blood splattered the walls and soaked the floor, turning the Lancelin home into a scene straight out of a nightmare. When the frenzy finally ended, the Papin sisters stood amidst the carnage, panting and covered in blood. The house was silent except for the sound of their ragged breathing. Without saying a word, they began to clean themselves up. They washed the blood from their hands, locked the doors, and retreated to their room, where they lit a single candle and climbed into bed. As they lay there waiting for what would come next, there was no sign of panic or regret. To them, it was done. Whatever had driven them to commit such a horrific act had passed, leaving only a calm, eerie silence in its wake. That night, Rene, Liani's husband and Genevieve's father, grew concerned when his wife and daughter failed to arrive at the brother-in-law's house for dinner. Accompanied by a friend, he returned home to check on them. But when he reached the house, he found the doors locked. The lights were off and an unsettling stillness inside. He knocked and called out, but there was no response. Something felt wrong. Rene's unease only grew as he circled the property, eventually enlisting the help of the police to gain entry. When officers forced the door open, they stepped into a scene so horrific that even seasoned investigators struggled to process what they were seeing. The bodies of Liani and Genevieve lay on the floor, surrounded by pools of blood. Their faces were beyond recognition, their eyes gouged out, and their bodies mutilated in a frenzy of violence. It was a sight that one psychiatrist would later describe as an orgy of blood. Upstairs, the police discovered Christine and Lea in their room. The sisters were calm, sitting together in their bed with a single candle burning nearby. Their hands, faces, and clothes were still stained with blood. And when questioned, Christine immediately confessed, stating coldly, "It was her or us." Lea, echoing her sister's word, declared,
From now on, I am deaf and dumb.
Their lack of emotion chilled the officers to the core. News of the murder spread quickly, catching the attention of the public. Some saw the crime as a grim reflection of the oppressive class divide in France at the time. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir argued that Papin sisters' actions were the result of years of mistreatment and dehumanization, symbolizing the struggles of the working class against their wealthy employers. Others, however, believed the murders went far beyond class struggle and pointed to deeper psychological issues. The trial of the sisters began in September 1933, attracting massive public interest. During the proceedings, the defense argued that the sisters suffered from a condition called folie douce, or shared psychosis. The disorder, they claimed, explained their disturbing bond, their shared delusions, and their willingness to commit such horrific acts together. Evidence of mental illness ran in their family. An uncle had died by suicide, a cousin had been committed to an asylum, and their grandfather had a history of violence outburst. Despite these arguments, the court declared both sisters sane and fully responsible for their actions. Christine, seen as the dominant instigator, was sentenced to death by the guillotine, while Lea received 10 years of hard labor. But the story didn't end there. Christine's mental state rapidly deteriorated after her sentencing. While awaiting execution, she reportedly clawed at her own eyes, mirroring the horrific act she had inflicted on Genevieve. Her sentence was later commuted to life in prison, but her decline continued. She refused to eat and died in 1937, just 4 years after the murders. Lea, on the other hand, was released early for good behavior after serving 8 years. She assumed a new identity and lived a quiet, uneventful life with her mother, leaving behind the horrors of that February night. Now, the story of Christine and Lea remains one of the most disturbing and perplexing crimes in French history. What led these two sisters, seemingly dedicated and quiet workers, to commit such an unthinkable act? Was it for years of pent-up frustration from their harsh upbringing and rigid working conditions? Or was it something more sinister, rooted in sheer psychosis and an unhealthy dependence on one another? Even now, nearly a century later, the case of the sisters continues to fascinate and horrify. It's been analyzed through countless lenses. But no matter how it's interpreted, one thing is certain. The events of that cold February evening left a stain on history that won't soon be forgotten. And so the question lingers. Were the sisters victims of their circumstances? Or were they always destined to snap? Whatever the answer is, this story is a haunting reminder of just how dark the human mind can go. Well, that'll do it for today's story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like stories like this, then please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.